Okay, welcome to the deep dive. We've got quite a stack of sources in front of us today, all focused on a writer who has absolutely exploded onto the fantasy scene and, well, her massively popular Breakout series.
That's right. We're diving deep into the world of Sarah J. Maas, and specifically, we're going to unpack everything our sources are telling us about the first book in her A Court of Thorns and Roses series, often called ACOTAR.
Yeah, ACOTAR. So our mission today is pretty clear. Cut through all the material you've shared with us and really pull out the essential insights, maybe some surprising nuggets of knowledge about Maz herself, the series, and that crucial first book, all tailored specifically for you listening.
Exactly. Think of this as your shortcut, really. It's a way to get a rich understanding of the whole phenomena, the story, the characters, the world building, but grounded entirely in the material you've put right here in our hands.
So let's get into it. Let's unpack this fascinating world and see what stands out in these sources.
Where do we kick things off?
Well, I think it makes sense to start with the creator, right? Who is Sarah J. Maas, according to our sources?
Okay, so the material tells us she was born March 5th, 1986, in New York City, grew up in a Jewish family, and apparently showed a really strong interest in writing from, well, a pretty young age.
And her education seems particularly relevant here, doesn't it? Hamilton College, graduated magna cum laude in creative writing, but also, and this seems key, minored in religious studies.
Yeah, and what's fascinating, as the sources point out, is how that specific combination is often cited as forming a basis for the mythological elements, and maybe that complex character psychology people really respond to in her work.
Right, it suggests a certain foundation was laid there for building these intricate worlds and, getting into deep character motivations.
Absolutely. And she started incredibly young. The sources mentioned she began writing her first novel, Throne of Glass, when she was just 16.
16, wow. And then it took her over a decade to actually finish it and get it published. That kind of persistence before finding success is pretty striking.
It certainly is. And Throne of Glass really became her launch pad. The sources definitely highlight its immense success, millions sold, translated into, 36 languages? That paved the way.
And now, I mean, she's undeniably one of the biggest best-selling fantasy authors globally, hitting #1 across multiple series, Throne of Glass, Ikatar, and her Crescent City books, too. The reach is huge. 38 languages now.
Yeah, but her success isn't just about the numbers, is it? The sources repeatedly emphasize the critical acclaim and the reader appreciation for her work. They point specifically to her complex characters, the sheer depth of her world building, and how layered her stories feel.
And a major highlight, often noted, is her talent for creating these really strong female characters.
Definitely. So her writing style and core themes, what do the sources say kind of characterizes her approach?
Well, it's often described as being driven by intense character development, these really intricate romantic relationships, which are obviously key to Ikatar,
Yeah.
and that highly detailed fantasy world building. She consistently features strong female protagonists, usually on journeys of significant personal growth.
And those universal themes seem to resonate deeply. Love, sacrifice, power, responsibility, identity. These are clearly central pillars in her work.
Right. The sources describe her style as like fluid and accessible enough for the YA market, which is where she started, but with this real emotional and psychological depth that clearly hooks adult readers too.
It's also worth mentioning, as the sources do, her work outside her main series, like her contributions to the DC Icon series, reinterpreting superheroes.
Oh, right.
It just shows her ability to take existing popular concepts, whether it's superheroes or, in this case, fairy tales, and really rework them through her own distinctive lens, which is exactly what we see in ACOTAR.
Okay, that gives us a good picture of the author. Now let's zoom in on the series that's the focus of this deep dive. A Court of Thorns and Roses.
All right, ACOTAR. So this series, as the sources explain it, centers on this young huntress, Feyre, and the, tumultuous adventures that unfold after she gets pulled into the Feylands. It's framed as an epic love story, yes, but also this fierce struggle, survival, change, all within the magical realm of Prythian and its different courts.
And it's an ongoing story, still unfolding. The sources confirm 5 novels out currently, and a 6th one is expected.
Yes, exactly. It's a big, sprawling narrative. And it does something pretty interesting by blending genres. It explicitly takes classic fairy tale elements, especially Beauty and the Beast, which we'll definitely get into, and weaves them together with modern YA fiction sensibilities that focus on strong female leads, complex personal arcs, all within a really detailed world.
The core focus, then, according to the analysis and the sources, seems to be exploring those intricate boundaries between the human and Fey worlds, and using that whole setting to dive deep into those themes we just mentioned: love, sacrifice, power, identity.
hmm And the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, is where it all begins. This is the foundation. And, frankly, this is where it gets really interesting.
Let's unpack the plot of this first book, then. Following Feyre's journey, just as the sources lay it out, it starts with her as a 19-year-old huntress, right? In the human lands, struggling, burdened by the need to provide for her impoverished family after her father's failures.
Right, that early struggle really defines her initial character. The inciting incident, the thing that kicks it all off, happens when she kills a large wolf while hunting in the forest near the wall.
Okay.
But what's fascinating here, and the sources point this out, is that this isn't just a kill for survival. This simple act, unknowingly, breaks some kind of magical spell connected to the Fey world.
Ah, so there's an immediate magical consequence, which arrives quickly, I gather.
Very quickly. High Lord Tamlin from the Spring Court across the wall shows up. He demands retribution for the life she took, because that wolf wasn't just a wolf. He gives her a stark choice: death, or leave her world behind and live in the Feylands, specifically at his manor.
And she chooses life, which means this forced transition into the complete unknown. She enters Tamlin's Spring Court Manor, and it's this world of, like, unimaginable luxury compared to her old life.
Yeah, but also one filled with these mysterious rules and restrictions she doesn't understand. The sources note this very clearly mirrors that classic hero's journey structure, stepping from the familiar, ordinary world into a magical, unfamiliar one.
So once she's there, her life changes dramatically. She starts forming relationships.
Particularly with Tamlin himself and his friend Lucien, who's also part of the court. And a romantic connection begins to develop between Feyre and Tamlin.
But it's not all sunshine and roses, so to speak. There's a conflict brewing.
Exactly. Beneath the beautiful surface, there's a major problem. The sources reveal the Spring Court is under this powerful curse laid by a really malevolent Fey sorceress named Amarantha. This curse forces the court members to wear masks, literally, and it suppresses their true magical powers.
Okay, that's a big deal.
It is. And it's during this time, under this intense pressure, that Tamlin's initially protective nature towards Feyre starts to, well, shift. It becomes more controlling, more oppressive. The sources flag this as a key development.
And the stakes get even higher, right? Feyre learns this isn't just about the Spring Court. Amarantha is a threat to all of Prythian.
Precisely. And this detail in the sources, it raises that important question that echoes through the whole series. What happens when a very personal struggle suddenly becomes, a world-threatening problem?
Faced with this massive threat, Feyre makes a huge decision. To save Tamlin and his court, she chooses to go to Amarantha's stronghold, this dangerous place called Under the Mountain.
Yes, and this is where the core trials happen. Amarantha forces her through 3 incredibly grueling tests. They push her to her absolute physical, mental, and emotional limits.
These sound like critical turning points for her growth.
Absolutely. They echo classic fairy tale tasks, but, as the sources highlight, they're layered with a much deeper psychological dimension. And it's also here, in this really perilous setting, that she develops this complex and frankly intriguing relationship with another High Lord, Rhysand of the Night Court.
Okay, so the narrative builds towards a climax.
It does. Feyre makes the ultimate sacrifice. She gives her life in a final, desperate attempt to break the curse and save Tamlin and the others trapped with him under the mountain.
She does, but obviously that's not the end of her story.
No. And this leads to maybe the most significant transformation in the book. Because of her sacrifice, she physically dies. But, and this is absolutely fascinating, a pivotal moment the sources really analyze, she is resurrected. She's brought back to life by the combined power of all 7 High Lords of Prythian. And in doing so, they transform her into one of them, into a Fey being. High Fey, actually.
Wow. So she's reborn.
Essentially, yes. This rebirth positions her as this unique being who bridges both worlds. She has her human resilience and spirit, but now also newfound magical powers as a High Fey.
So the book ends with Amarantha defeated, the curse broken, and Feyre fundamentally changed. It sounds like it doesn't just wrap things up, but but really throws open the door to huge new possibilities for her character and the future of Prithian. Sets up the rest of the series perfectly.
Exactly. So who are the key players driving this whole narrative, according to our sources?
Well, obviously at the center is Feyre Archeron, the protagonist. Initially, she's depicted as this fiercely determined, almost grimly self-sacrificing huntress. The sources give us some visuals: slender but strong, agile from hunting, brown hair, gray-blue eyes, and that really striking detail of her calloused hands from using her bow. Her face even looks older than 19 because of the hardship.
And her character arc is just immense, isn't it?
Yeah.
A transformation from that state of struggle and trauma to one of self-discovery and finding her own power. The sources are very clear that her psychological depth is directly linked to her early life trauma, the poverty, her father's failure, her mother's deathbed promise. It all instilled this need for control and shaped her whole healing process.
And this journey is fundamental to that theme of empowering female characters that the sources identify as so key to Maz's work. Feyre isn't just reacting. She becomes a really active force in her own story.
Definitely. Then there's Tamlin, the High Lord of the Spring Court.
Yeah.
He's described as, conventionally physically attractive, tall, green eyes, golden hair, possesses powerful magic tied to nature, plants, growth.
But the sources point out his relationship with Feyre is used to explore some really crucial, maybe uncomfortable dynamics. While he starts out seeming protective and kind under the pressure of Amarantha's curse, that protective nature twists into something, well, controlling,
Right.
possessive even.
Right. And this shift is highlighted as a way the book really makes you question what healthy love looks like versus unhealthy controlling behavior.
A really complex character introduced in this book is Rysand, the High Lord of the Night Court. He initially comes across almost like an antagonist working for Amarantha.
But the sources quickly reveal there are layers there. He's described very vividly: those mesmerizing violet purple eyes, black hair. Possesses incredibly powerful mental magic, including mind reading. His character arc, especially as it develops later, really serves to underline that theme that appearances can be incredibly deceiving.
We also meet Lucien. He's a member of the Spring Court, Tamlin's closest friend and emissary. Pretty distinctive with his red hair and that mechanical eye, which is gold and red.
Yeah, he's portrayed as witty, intelligent, and deeply loyal to Tamlin. But the sources note his internal conflict. He's caught between that loyalty and his growing connection with and concern for Feyre. Shows complex emotional conflicts.
The sources also briefly flesh out Feyre's human family, who are obviously crucial to her backstory and initial motivations. There's Elaine, the kind, sensitive middle sister who loves gardening and sort of avoids reality.
Then Nesta, the proud, sharp-tongued eldest sister. Her tough exterior hides a lot of vulnerability and shame about their situation.
And Father Archeron, whose past financial failures are the root of their poverty, and who pretty much shirks responsibility, leaving it all to Feyre.
And of course, we have to mention the central antagonist of this first book, Amarantha, the powerful, truly malevolent Fey sorceress whose curse on Prithian, originating from her own bitterness and lust for power, sets the main conflict in motion.
Okay. Let's talk about the setting that holds all these characters and conflicts the magical realm of Prithian itself.
Right. The geography is foundational. The sources explain it's divided into 7 distinct courts: spring, summer, autumn, winter, dawn, day, and night. Each one is tied to different seasons or natural forces, which gives them really unique identities.
Yes, and this creates such a rich tapestry for the story. Each court has its own culture, traditions, specific types of magic, and is ruled by a High Lord. The sources give examples like Spring Court is associated with rebirth, growth, plants.
While the Night Court is linked more to mystery, shadows, power, intuition, mental abilities, this diversity just makes the world feel vast and believable, despite being fantasy.
And the magic system itself, how does it work in Prithian based on what the sources describe?
It seems to be based heavily on these natural forces and also emotional connections. The Fey Lords, the High Lords especially, are intimately connected to their specific domains and elements: plants, light, shadow, the mind, animal forms.
Crucially, though, the sources emphasize that magic here isn't just raw power, it comes with or requires responsibility. There are serious consequences if it's abused or misused. What's fascinating here is how tightly woven magic is into the very identity of the Fae and their environment.
And a key physical element we mentioned is the magical wall, isn't it?
It is. That wall separates the human lands from the Fae lands of Prithian. It acts as this barrier, supposedly meant to maintain balance and keep mortals safe, but it's also porous and contested. It's a structural element in the world that directly impacts the characters' lives and choices, like Feyre crossing it.
And the social structure within Prythian, how's that depicted?
It's shown as a pretty rigid hierarchy. The High Lords hold significant, often absolute, power within their respective courts. The sources point out that this structure allows Maz to really explore themes of power dynamics, leadership, good and bad, and how individuals, particularly Feyre as an outsider initially, navigate, challenge, or are constrained by these systems.
Okay, so beyond the exciting plot and the memorable characters, what are the deeper currents the sources suggest run through this book, the major themes?
Yeah, absolutely. Power and responsibility comes up again and again as a fundamental theme. The sources highlight how Feyre's journey, especially looking across the whole series, is about breaking traditional gender norms. She grows into her power and uses it to influence both Fae and human worlds, often advocating for peace over conflict, challenging inequality.
Her personal arc is just deeply tied to discovering the significant, sometimes heavy responsibility that comes with gaining power, whether that's political influence or actual magical ability.
And this really makes you pause and think, doesn't it? What responsibility do you, listening, feel you have when you gain influence or a new ability in your own life? It's a relatable question.
Totally. Another central theme the sources identify is identity and self-discovery. Feyre's dramatic shift from the human world into the Fey realm is explicitly framed as a symbol for her journey of discovering who she truly is and realizing her own potential, far beyond just being a huntress providing for family.
The sources note this resonates really strongly with young adult readers who are often navigating their own questions of identity, but it's universal, really.
And the romantic elements, which are obviously so central to Akotar's appeal, they aren't just there for the swoon factor. The sources made it clear they're actively used to question healthy relationship characteristics.
Right, that relationship between Feyre and Tamlin, especially how it shifts under the mountain, is a primary vehicle for exploring that thin, often blurry line between protective love and behavior that becomes controlling or oppressive.
Sacrifice and altruism are also absolutely core to Feyre's character right from page 1. She makes immense sacrifices initially for her family's survival, then for Tamlin and his court, and ultimately risking her life for all of Prythian.
But the sources also point out that this theme isn't presented simply. It raises questions about personal limits and self-worth. Her journey isn't just about sacrificing for others, but finding a balance that includes valuing herself and her own needs too.
And then there's that literal transformation and rebirth at the end of the first book. Feyre's death and resurrection as High Fae isn't just a cool plot twist. The sources frame it as this incredibly powerful symbol of transformation, physical, yes, but also psychological and spiritual.
Yeah, it really drives home the idea that profound personal growth often comes from immense difficulty and suffering, leading to a stronger, fundamentally changed self.
So how does Maz actually achieve all this? Let's look quickly at the literary techniques and the context the sources discuss.
Well, the writing technique itself is key. The whole book is told in the first person, entirely through Feyre's perspective. This gives you, the reader, immediate, intimate access to her thoughts, her feelings, her interpretations of everything happening around her.
And the sources say this really strengthens the emotional connection. It makes her personal growth journey, her fears, her triumphs, incredibly compelling to follow from the inside.
The world building is obviously another major factor. Maz uses incredibly rich sensory detail to bring Prythian to life. The sources highlight how each court, spring, night, etc. has its own unique atmosphere, architecture, clothing, culture. It creates this vivid imagery that helps make the fantasy realm feel convincing and real.
Dialogue is also used very effectively, the sources note. It's not just for dumping information or moving the plot forward. You can see how Feyre's speech, her confidence, even her internal perspective shared through narration, visibly changed throughout the book, reflecting her internal transformation.
And dialogue also reveals so much about the relationship dynamics, doesn't it? Both the positive connections and the more problematic ones.
And the narrative structure itself. It follows a pretty classic path, recognizable as the hero's journey. Feyre is called out of her ordinary human world. She faces significant trials under the mountain, undergoes that profound transformation, and her story ends setting her up for a return, now changed, to influence her world.
And looking at the broader cultural context for a moment, the sources identify significant feminist elements at play here. Clearly influenced by contemporary feminist literature and ideas, the book features this strong female protagonist who actively questions and challenges traditional roles. She asserts her own power and agency.
Yeah, Feyre is definitely not a passive character waiting around to be saved. She takes action, makes difficult choices, even when she's scared or outmatched. The sources note this is seen as particularly inspiring for many young women readers.
It's also very clearly a reinterpretation of fairy tales. It specifically takes the Beauty and the Beast framework girl goes to live with a cursed beast-like figure in an enchanted place, but updates it significantly for a modern audience.
Right, and incorporates contemporary values, much more psychological complexity in the characters. It keeps those core resonant elements, but modernizes the themes, the motivations, the character arcs. It links those timeless fairy tale concepts to modern issues like trauma, consent, abuse, finding your voice, personal agency.
And finally, its place in the YA fantasy landscape is pretty undeniable now. The sources describe its significant impact in popularizing these really detailed worlds, complex romance plots, and especially these strong, proactive female protagonists within the genre.
Absolutely. Its immense success hasn't just boosted YA fantasy's popularity overall, particularly among young women, but it seems to have influenced subsequent authors as well. It just connects deeply with readers through those themes of personal growth, overcoming trauma, and navigating really challenging relationships.
So we've taken quite a deep dive into Sarah J. Maas and the first A Court of Thorns and Roses book. We've carefully explored the detailed world, the complex characters, and those incredibly resonant themes, all guided by the source materials you shared with us.
Yeah, and what really stands out to me after going through all this material is how skillfully it takes something as familiar, almost archetypal, as a classic fairy tale structure and completely transforms it. It spins it into this compelling story about overcoming trauma, finding your own inner power, and really critically examining relationship dynamics, especially distinguishing between genuine protection and insidious control.
It's genuinely much more layered than just a simple love story in a fantasy setting, isn't it?
Definitely. And why should you care about all this? Well, because understanding these elements, Feyre's difficult but ultimately empowering journey, the intricate complexity of the world she enters, those underlying themes of identity, power, sacrifice, transformation, it gives you a far richer appreciation. Not just for this specific book and series, but for how modern fantasy can and does actively engage with timeless human experiences and pretty profound psychological struggles. It shows how these stories can help us process big ideas.
We really hope this deep dive has delivered those aha moments, those connections you were looking for in the material.
And maybe to leave you with a final thought, something to mull over, pulling directly from Feyre's journey of transformation and rebirth. If overcoming immense challenges and undergoing profound change is central to her emergence as this stronger, more complete being, how do you navigate the difficult periods in your own life? What challenges, big or small, have maybe forced you to discover a hidden power or strength within yourself that you didn't even know was there?
Something to think about. That concludes our deep dive.